Jim, always good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Oh, Sean, it's just such a pleasure to be here. By the way, too many times I spend too much time watching the Sean Spicer show than I am doing the work that I need to
No,
do.
you can never watch it enough. In fact, that so let's last week we hit the 100-day mark as we headed into 200 days. What do you think the lessons learned are? Meaning what is going really well polling wise, image wise? What do they need? Where are the areas of improvement?
Look, I give the administration so much credit because you can't accomplish what they've accomplished without the proper planning. And you think about it, where we were, like literally just last year, where we had these crazy open borders. And, they were all telling us, unless we get bipartisan immigration reform, we can't solve the border problem. And what do we find out? Just need a new president. That's how we solve the border problem. But, they'll also tell you, they'll be the first ones to tell you, even when it comes to immigration, the border, we've still got a lot of work to do. They've done an incredible job at the border, but there's still a lot of criminals. There's still a lot of terrorists that are in the United States of America because of what happened under the chaos that was Joe Biden's administration. So I think they've done an incredible job because, like, even a lot of folks, I've been doing a lot of focus groups recently among swing voters. And there is they are giving Donald Trump and Republicans on whether it's the economy, whether it's national security, crime, they're giving them the benefit of the doubt on these issues, even on tariffs. The Democrats love saying, "Oh, see how unpopular these tariffs are." We just asked in a national survey whether they thought tariffs and using it as a negotiating tool was going to help the economy and their economic situation or hurt it. By a 2-to-1 margin, they believe it's actually going to help the economy, 52-26. So it's, there's a lot of work in progress. And again, that big number, Sean, that I always point back to is 70% of Americans said the country was off on the wrong track on election day. So they knew it.
Where is it now?
A lot of messes to fix. It's right now, it's around 42 right direction, around 50% wrong track. So you've seen a big improvement. But if you're the Republicans and you want to defy history in the midterm election, Sean, what do you have to do? You have to get that up over 50% in terms of the right direction. That's where it is for presidents when they win re-election. And that's where it is. Like we did the polling for the Speaker of the House back in 2002. I was working for Tom Davis, who was head of the NRCC at the time. We also worked for Jim Gilmore, who'd been running the RNC. So back when we defied history and actually picked up seats during the midterms in 2002, it was because the view was George W. Bush and the Republicans had the economy doing well. They were keeping people safe. And they were able to also go back to the voters with some good accomplishments, not the least of which was a prescription drug benefit when it came to Medicare. And I'm showing my age there, Sean.
But no. But I was just thinking back, that 2000 to 2002 period. I mean, just yes or no. I guess let's just start this way. Don't you think like mechanics matter though to like how those candidates ran and how they were prepared? I mean, that had something to do with it, right?
Without a doubt.
Okay, yeah. So who was running the incumbent retention part at the party during that 2000 to 2002 period? Do you remember who that guy was?
Look, was that you?
Oh, was it? Was it?
I didn't think
when we defied history. You know what? I just let me look at my calendar. It was. I just off the top of my head, I was thinking, where was I from 2000 to 2002?
Yeah.
Interesting. Anyway, all right.
Did we have any incumbents? This is me thing. Did we have any incumbents that lost in 2002?
Yeah. Remember Felix Garuccio?
Yes, Felix.
George Geekus in Pennsylvania. Although that was a member.
Man.
Yeah. So
I'm
but they
impressed.
were those were
Over
mechanics.
20
They
years later,
didn't raise.
remember all those.
You can't help it. This is when that scarred into my memory, Jim. I mean, All right, guys, hate to interrupt this conversation, but you guys, I've always told you about how I fall asleep, but when I wake up, I love starting the day with a cup of Wire Two Fish coffee. Check this bag out. It's getting smaller. I love when I send my order in and I get a nice note back from Leah, one of the founders. It's awesome. It's such a great company. It's a great cup of coffee. I love the Arabica beans. That one that I just showed you that I do is the medium roast, which I'm a huge fan of. When I make a pot for a group of folks, I even try to make a little extra and then keep it for iced coffee for the week. I love this stuff. Not only is the coffee great, the company's great. And that's why I love buying it, because when I use my money, I know that I'm not just buying a great product, which is cool, but I also know that I've got a great company that loves coffee, fishing, clean water initiatives, and Jesus. And that's literally, it's probably the opposite, right? They love Jesus, fishing, and good coffee. But it's really cool. They give 25% of their profits to faith-based and clean water initiatives. I can totally get behind that. And here's really cool news. If you go to wired2fishcoffee.com, and it's the numeral 2, so it's wired2fishcoffee.com. They've now got 5-pound bags. So you can get the 2-pound bag like I do, or if you're a big coffee drinker, you get the 5-pound. It's much more economical. I love this brand. Don't forget, you can use code WeCare, one word, WeCare, and you get 10% off of your first order. So go over to wired2fishcoffee.com and let's make 2025 the year we align our coffee and our values. Back to the conversation with Jim. But I digress for a second, because I do, when you were talking about all this, like a lot of things popped in my head, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things is, like, to your point, like, people do look at the border in particular and some of these other things and say, wow, what a sea change. But I have my theories on this, and this is but I want you to answer this first. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I look and I say, okay, based on the last 4 years, look at what Donald Trump has done. Border secure. I go into the supermarket. I mean, I literally drove carpool last week for the kids, and I'm going through Alexandria, and gas had been at $2.90 something. It was down to $2.87 for unleaded. You look at egg prices that were as high as like $6, and now they're back down. So I'm a big believer that if you voted on, in inflation, I mean, like, the things that really matter to people are moving in the right direction. But when I go look at like Real Clear Politics and I look at the president's approval rating or the New York Times or CNN, it's in the low 40s and it's dropped. Okay, I have my theories, but I want to hear yours. Why?
Well, first of all, has his approval dropped a little bit? Yeah, because he's doing some hard things.
Right.
But I have literally seen 4 legitimate polls, including one of my own, within the last week. And these, when I say legitimate polls, these are from private Republican pollsters. His job approval rating is right around 50%, give or take. It's right around. Don't believe the New York Times poll, the Washington Post poll, because it's literally just like their reporting is biased and the journalism. I mean, they basically become left-wing blogs for all intents and purposes. When you look at the demographics on the New York Times poll, only 37% of their sample actually voted for Donald Trump. Last I checked, he got 77 million voters, and about half the electorate actually voted for him. So they're undersampling Trump voters by about 13 points. And then when you look at the ABC News, Washington Post poll, it's only 34% will tell you they actually voted for Donald Trump. I don't know how they do it, but for some reason they seem to miss, our friend Kellyanne.
How many people, what percentage do they say voted for Harris?
Yeah, it's usually around the same percentage that they have voted for Donald Trump. And remember, he beat her by a couple points.
Right.
But they are clearly, and what happens is, Sean, by the way, it also tells you they have a lot of non-voters in there. Their samples, a lot of times they're adults and they're registered voters. And we all know the universe is much, much smaller. It's a smaller universe that comes out during the midterms than comes out during the national presidential elections. So they're getting these non-voters, for whatever reason, always tend to lean left. So that's why they're getting these crazy numbers that they're getting right now. Because look, when his poll comes out, Mark Penn, who's a Democratic pollster, he does the Harvard-Harris. He does a great job. I believe his last survey, he had Donald Trump's approval rating at about 50%. So these were the same polls, by the way, that were telling us back in 2020, Donald Trump had a 38% approval, a 39% approval rating. And then what happened was, between him and Joe Biden it was a very close election back in 2020. And there's no way that election would have been close if his job approval rating was at 38, 39%. And look, there's no question now. Whenever you're trying to do big changes here, there's going to you're going to have a little bit of erosion in your support. But you know what? Doesn't matter now. And the White House understands this. The Republicans in Congress understand it. One of the reasons they voted for Donald Trump and the Republicans this time was because people just knew, in spite of the media, the Joe Biden's White House and Kamala Harris, they're trying to tell you there's no inflation and the economy's doing great. 70% countries off on the wrong track. They knew it. They knew they were doing better under Donald Trump. They give him a lot of credibility still on the issue of especially the economy. And they know when it all said and done, if we can go into the election in these midterms, just like they did in 2002, where they're feeling like they have more money in their pockets and the trains are running on time, that's when you have the Republicans defy history and pick up seats during the midterms.
All right, I love this explanation because it wasn't one of my two, and I want to give you my two reasons. But I want to just, before I do that, because you brought up the midterms, before I give you my two and have you react, if Speaker Mike Johnson called you right now, or Richard Hudson, the congressman that leads the National Republican Congressional Committee, and said, all right, Jim, we're watching these polls. We got to figure out what we need to do going into the midterms. Is your answer to them stay the course, or is it, hey, do more on the following two fronts? Like, what do you tell him?
Get accomplishments done. And you better get those tax cuts done as soon as possible, because that was one of our problems during the midterms back in 2018. They didn't they literally passed those tax cuts back in 2018, right. Right before the first of the year. So people during the midterms weren't really feeling the effects of all the good things that happened, and our economy was starting to boom. And then obviously, we had the COVID shutdown, which hurt the economy back in 2020. Get those tax cuts passed ASAP, because if there's anything we've learned, what's going to happen is a lot of the problem is this administration is doing great stuff when it comes to the economy, energy independence. The deregulation. There was one report that came out the other day that said the average American is going to save $11,000 a year because of the deregulation that this administration is doing. People understand the smart cuts that are being done, the effective cuts that are being done in government. That's going to lead to less inflation. We all know what caused the inflation under Joe Biden, the record inflation. What caused it was all this crazy spending. So you've got the spending cuts, you've got the deregulation, you've got the energy independence, you've got us, negotiating better and fair trade agreements. You throw the tax cuts on top of that, I'm telling you, the economy is going to boom. What I would tell the Republicans, and I think they know this, John Thune, Mike Johnson, get those tax cuts passed ASAP, and you will see a booming economy. That's how we sprint and go into the midterms with momentum.
All right, so I'll give you my two, and the first one plays into what you're talking about, I think. But I wanted to, so I had this conversation last week on the 100-day mark with Kalen Dorr, who used to work for me in the first Trump administration, now leads like the surrogate operations and a lot of helps put out the messaging and stuff like that. And I said to Kalen, I said, you sent me the list of accomplishments. And the first draft that he gave me was 23 pages.
Yeah.
And I said to Kalen, look, I was paging through this.
Yeah.
And I forgot a lot of what you've done. And I said, and I mean this like, seriously, I said, look, you're never going to keep up with Donald Trump. I know that. I've experienced it personally. I know you probably have too. But I said, do you think that like somehow you need to slow, like part of the problem, I think, is that when you're doing this much stuff, and don't get me wrong. It's like, how do you take a really great product and figure out on the label that's this big, how to put all the great attributes, right? Yeah. So part of what I've been trying to say to them is, how do you guys like, is part of the problem, I guess this is the first question I have of my 2-part thing about the poll numbers, is part of the problem is that when you're moving at breakneck speed, you don't have time to stop and say, hey, by the way, I mean, everyone gets the border. I think they've done a really good job on that. But there's a lot of these other things that I was paging through and I thought, wow, I forgot you guys did that. Or there wasn't a lot of, like, do they need to, I know, again, I'm saying this with knowing that it's Donald Trump, but do they need to slow down a little bit or double down on, I mean, I feel like it's like, when I pulled out, when my wife and I bought our last car and like, 2 years later, we were checking something out in the car and the guy said, do you know if you press this button, it does that? And I was like, I've never known that. Like for 2 years, I didn't even know that the car could do this because there were so many features that we didn't even take the time to learn. And I feel like in some ways that's the Trump administration. They're doing so much stuff that sometimes you don't even stop to know all the features.
Oh, and you know what, Sean? That's a very valid point. But you know why Donald Trump ran for president? I literally thought, I remember meeting with him the summer after he left office, and I'm saying, he's not running again. His life was too good. I saw him down in Bedminster. He was tan, rested, relaxed and ready. He had the weight of the world off his shoulders. And then as I was meeting with him, especially it started in that summer of 22, when we had the record inflation and then we had the Afghanistan debacle, I'm saying, this guy's running because he believes he's not just fixing America for the next 4 years. He's fixing America for the next 400 years.
Yeah.
He looks at this as place. You know what? He views us as a necessary evil as his pollsters. He literally does. We are a necessary evil for him. Everyone, he doesn't wake up every morning and look at polls.
You know what, Jim? I'm so glad you said that because I keep telling people if he wanted high poll numbers, he knows how to do this. Do the easy stuff. Don't take on the hard stuff. He gets it. I'm so glad you just said that because I keep saying this over and over. Like doing the tariffs, making other countries accountable is tough. If it was easy, someone else would have done it. And this is the point that like if he wanted Jim and John McLaughlin to walk in and say, tell me how great I am, you go, guess what? Do more of like getting rid of plastic straws. Everyone loves that. It's easy. But he's doing big, bold things, and that's hard.
He's doing things to set up America for years and years to come. And he understands history. He understands that most quote unquote empires, whether it's the Roman Empire, etc., they've got a shelf life of usually only a few hundred years. We want to make sure that we continue this beautiful, great American democratic experiment for years and years to come. And what he's doing is he's setting up America. And you know what? Because he doesn't care about the polls. He doesn't care, what the Washington Post or the New York Times say about him. And you know what? And I tell people this all the time. I'm somebody who's on the board at CPAC. I grew up in the conservative movement. Donald Trump is not necessarily a movement conservative. He's a common sense guy.
Yes.
And what he sees, he saw what worked the first time he was president. And just as important, he saw what failed under the last 4 years of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. So that's what he's going to do. He's going to figure out the things that work best to make us more prosperous and to make us safer. And, one of the things I haven't touched on at all is, the media is like criticizing him because he's trying to bring peace in the Middle East and in the Ukraine-Russia war. And the conversation before he got elected was, how long is this war going to last? Okay. Now it's, okay, when is the fighting going to stop? When is the bloodshed going to stop?
Yes. By the way, so that's literally my second thing that I was going to ask you about because I'll say it backwards since you brought this up, but I'm like, okay, again, the context isn't there. Russia invaded Crimea during Obama. Russia took over Ukraine and invaded it in Biden. None of that happened in Trump. He's cleaning up everybody else's mess. He's doing the same thing with Hamas, right? That happened under Biden. The withdrawal from Afghanistan under Biden. Like all of these things, and he is cleaning up other people's messes. Okay, but this is where this leads me perfectly to my other big polling question. The Media Research Center put out a study last week that says 92% of the coverage of Donald Trump's first 100 days was negative. Now, Jim McLaughlin, if I tell you, here's a product that I want you to buy, you're going to the store in an hour, but I'm going to tell you something about it. It sucks. It's going to make you really unhealthy. It costs a ton of money. It's going to break down. It looks horrible. Do you want to buy it? You're going to be like, no. And so what I think happens is, to your point about Ukraine, or for example, or any of these things, they're like, oh, this is what Trump's doing. This is bad. He's horrible at this. He's slashing that. He's cutting that. And then you go, wow, I guess I don't like what he's doing, right? I think that the media's negative coverage is an attempt to try to get his polls down and say, oh, see, it's not popular. When in fact, so they're trying to make a narrative come true. But I think this is why I go back to the first question I asked you, because when you talk to people and say, so let me get this straight, what is it that you don't like? Well, I read a story that it's a constitutional crisis. Okay, what's the crisis? That he's deporting an MS-13 gangbanger that beat his wife? Oh, is that what you're upset about? Well, no, I read a story in the New York Times. I think that the New York Times, Politico, NBC, that their negative comments, stories, false narratives against Trump are an attempt to drive his poll numbers down to create a narrative that then they can say, oh, well, see, he's not popular. But so what in, I guess all I'm asking you in a very long-winded way is to say, what impact is the media's attempt to attack him having on his image?
Oh, and I don't think there's any question about it, that it is affecting things a little bit. But you know what? The vast majority of Americans, if they were paying attention to the old legacy media, we would have President Kamala Harris now. And it just goes to show you how little credibility that they have when, and by the way, Brent Bozell and Dan Schneider at the Media Research Center that put that study out there, they do incredible work. Just think about it. And I followed that because I love some of the work that they do. 92% of the coverage against Donald Trump was negative, with all the good things that he's done. Like you said, 11 pages of accomplishments, but not to the mainstream media. By the way, 97% of the coverage on Elon Musk was negative.
100% against Hegseth.
100% against our friend Pete Hegseth. And by the way, recruitment for our military is through the roof.
Dude, but the funny part is, that's the funny thing is, how do you not say that that's a positive? Like somehow they can turn the biggest win it's like Jim McLaughlin won the lottery. Now he's gonna squander.
Now he's gonna have to pay a lot of taxes.
Right. They can turn the best thing into the most negative thing. Jim, I want to ask you one other thing though. We spend all of this time the media does, talking about Donald Trump's poll numbers up and down. But here's the thing that they don't want to tell you. The Democrats are in a world of hurt. They have no leader. They have no policies. How bad is it right now for the Democratic Party?
Well, just look at the last couple days. Who is the media trying to elevate again? They're trying to elevate Kamala Harris, and they're trying to, elevate Tampon Tim Walz.
He's a code talker. Did you know that? He's a code talker.
He knows how to get men to vote for white men. I'm sorry, they always got to play the race card. He knows how to get white men. Let me tell you something. Most normal, especially Midwestern white men, the last person they want to hear from is Tim Walz.
Right.
And it just goes to, and look, the big problem that the Democrats have, Sean, is they have a policy and a performance problem. Policy and performance. Everything they do turns to what, as President Trump says. You can't point to Gavin Newsom. He's doing a great job out in California, right? Horrible job.
Right.
You look at J.B. Pritzker, or Kathy Hochul in New York, just comes out. The vast majority of Democrats don't want to reelect her in recent polling in New York. And then you go to the only thing worse than their governors are their crazy Marxist socialist mayors. And I'm telling you, I'm going to, this is a little bit off track, but this guy, Mamandi in New York City, who's an admitted, terrorist sympathizer and basically a Marxist, I think he's going to give Andrew Cuomo a run for his money, because it's the radical left that is controlling these Democratic primaries across the country. And that's literally, it goes back to Donald Trump. Donald Trump is fighting all this stuff. He's trying to turn all this stuff back. And you know what I loved? The first quarter of the crime statistics in New York City, they went down for the first time significantly. You know when? Since Donald Trump was president. And now all the left wingers, all the Democrats in New York are trying to take credit for it. Why did it happen? He literally is getting the criminal illegal immigrants off the streets, even in a place like New York City where they're not really helping them that much. Talk about effectiveness. That's effectiveness.
Jim McLaughlin, always love our conversations. Thank you for sharing these insights with us, and look forward to having you back soon.
Thank you, Sean, and the pleasure's all mine.
All right, brother. See you soon. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.